I want you to picture the scene. It's November 24th, 1971. An incredibly ordinary-looking guy just boards an airplane. He's got on a dark business suit, a black tie, and polished shoes. He's not carrying luggage, literally nothing more than a simple briefcase. To everyone around him, he's just another quiet traveler heading home on the eve of Thanksgiving, right? Just a regular guy. But the events that are about to unfold, they're going to be anything but ordinary. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the vanishing of D.B. Cooper. Honestly, it remains the absolute darkest, most legendary, unsolved aviation mystery in FBI history. We're going to step into the timeline of a crime that still haunts investigators today and, let's be real, still captures our collective imagination well over 50 years later. So, setting the scene. Portland International Airport, 1971. It's this moody, rainy, classic Pacific Northwest evening. This quiet man walks right up to the counter, identifies himself simply as Dan Cooper, and casually purchases a one-way ticket for Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305. And the thing is, he easily blended right in. Cooper takes his seat on the Boeing 727, looking completely unassuming in his black clip-on tie. He just sat there quietly among 36 other passengers for what was supposed to be a super routine 30-minute commuter flight up to Seattle. Nothing felt dangerous. The cabin was calm, just a perfectly normal flight into the evening. But you know, here is exactly where the story takes a massive, chilling turn. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper hands this polite, folded little note to a flight attendant. Now, at first, she actually thought he was just slipping her his phone number, so she shoved it in her pocket. That's when Cooper leans in and delivers this terrifyingly quiet warning. You should read the note. I have a bomb. And the threat was absolutely undeniable. He cracked his briefcase just enough for her to see a tangle of wires, batteries, and these red cylinders. But here's the crazy part. His demands were delivered with this eerie, absolute calm. He wanted $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting for them on the runway in Seattle. So, Flight 305 lands in Seattle, right into the teeth of a heavy rainstorm. The 36 passengers are safely released into the dark, wet night. And they were completely unaware of how incredibly close to disaster they'd just been. But the crew? They had to remain on board as hostages, just waiting in the storm while the plane was refueled, and the cash and those 4 parachutes were loaded up.
Then, the aircraft doesn't stay on the ground. Flight 305 heads back into the dark. The Boeing 727 takes off again, this time ordered to fly south toward Mexico. It just disappears into this violent, storm-filled night sky. You can only imagine the tension inside that cabin. It must have been suffocating, with the crew trapped completely alone with a hijacker and a live explosive.
10,000 feet. That was the exact altitude Cooper demanded the plane maintain. And we have to talk about what was happening outside that pressurized cabin. A brutal, freezing rainstorm was raging over the incredibly rugged wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. The environmental conditions waiting out there in the pitch black were, frankly, lethal. Then, sometime after 8 p.m., the atmosphere inside the plane just shifted. The crew felt this sudden, subtle upward pop in the air pressure. A warning light flashes in the cockpit. Cooper had actually done the unthinkable. He had manually forced open the rear-aft staircase of the Boeing 727 while the plane was literally mid-flight. Which brings us to the impossible jump. Think about this, a man in a business suit and slip-on loafers, plunging out of a commercial airliner into a freezing rainstorm in the dead of night. He's descending over some of the most rugged, densely forested terrain in America. It is a total environmental nightmare. And just like that, poof, he was gone. The morning after, the grim reality of the situation really set in. The FBI and local authorities launched this massive, multi-agency manhunt. Searchers were out there physically combing through the harsh, muddy, freezing woods. They were desperately looking for any sign of a parachute, maybe the ransom money, or, of course, the man himself. They even scoured the fog-covered waters of the rivers and lakes all throughout the drop zone. Now, back on the plane, investigators had successfully recovered 66 of his fingerprints, his black clip-on tie, and 2 of the parachutes he left behind. But out here in the wild, despite pulling together this massive search grid, they found absolutely zero trace of the hijacker. Nothing.
Now, there's a really fascinating bit of observational irony in this case. We all know him as D.B. Cooper,
But that name, it's literally a media error that became a legend. During the frantic early hours of the investigation, a careless reporter accidentally confused the hijacker's actual alias, Dan Cooper, with the name of a completely innocent local man who was briefly questioned and cleared. His name was DB Cooper. The media ran with it, and well, the moniker stuck permanently.
What followed were just decades of dead ends. The FBI cast a massive net. They brought in former military paratroopers, survival experts, known criminals, you name it. But there was this recurring theme among the experts. They all said no professional skydiver would ever risk such a suicidal jump in those conditions. The gear he chose, the clothing he wore, the brutal weather, it all strongly pointed away from him being any sort of expert.
And this investigation spanned decades. Desks were just covered in declassified reports, suspect sketches, and endless maps. Hundreds of people were investigated. But it generated this heavy, cold case atmosphere. Because at the end of the day, there was never enough hard evidence to make a definitive match or actually secure a conviction out of the dozens of suspects.
But then the narrative takes a really startling turn. It's 1980, the Columbia River discovery. Nearly a full decade after the hijacking, a young boy was digging a fire pit in the sand along the shores of the Columbia River, and suddenly, his shovel hit something unusual. It was decaying bundles of cash, just buried right there in the mud.
The exact amount recovered? $5,520. And the absolutely crucial detail here is that the serial numbers on these deteriorated bills perfectly matched the master list of Cooper's ransom money. But instead of solving the case, this clue only deepened the mystery. I mean, did the money wash downriver? Did he bury it there? Did he even survive the jump at all? Or did the money just separate from him as he fell through the sky?
Which ultimately brings us to the FBI's final move. In July 2016, after 45 years of actively chasing leads, the FBI made the tough decision to formally suspend active resources on the case. They concluded that, given the harsh environmental realism of that night, Cooper likely perished in the jump. Yet, they failed to close the book entirely. The mystery was officially left unsolved.
Leaving us with one final, haunting question. Where did he go? We're left lingering on the reality that an ordinary-looking man stepped out of an airplane into a violent storm and simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but an answerless void. It's a story of pure tension, the unforgiving forces of nature, and the ultimate unknown. So what do you think happened to Dan Cooper?